This week in AI, has Google just retaken the lead from OpenAI and Microsoft, a huge regulatory warning from the EU, and some evidence that the people building AI models don't actually know how you are going to survive. It's been a busy week. Let's go. Starting with these huge AI announcements from Google then. This week in their developer conference, since ChatGPT was released in November, Google has been playing catch up to Microsoft and OpenAI in the AI wars. Well, this week at Google's developer conference keynote, they showed some of the tools that they've been working on to retake the lead. So what were the main takeaways? Well, the key to Google's survival as a business is maintaining its dominance in search. So all eyes were on its new search engine, which included generative AI. Just as with Bing, this thing uses generative AI to produce detailed text answers to more complex questions. For example, here there's a question about where to take some kids under 3. Now you can see there are some featured links to websites here. There are also some links to follow-up questions that you can ask. Now it remains to be seen exactly which search queries will trigger this generative AI component, although early signs indicate that Google's going to be avoiding some of the your money or your life questions, i.e. questions that people ask where there is money at stake or potentially health, because the impact of getting these questions wrong can be quite damaging. It remains to be seen exactly which types of search queries are going to trigger this new generative AI search answers. Although it does sound like Google is going to be more cautious with your money or your life search queries, these are ones that relate to people's health or financial situation, because the impact of answering these sorts of questions wrong can be quite damaging. And we know from the world of SEO that Google has a higher benchmark for your money or your life content anyway, so it makes sense that they would translate this across. There's also some indication that Google's going to be more inclined to use these generative AI answers for questions with no one right answer, or NORA. So how different is this search engine really? Well, we've kind of got this generative AI component which replaces featured snippets, which are the boxes of text that you sometimes see at the top of search results. We do have links to other websites here, and we've got these follow-up questions which allow you to sort of fine-tune the answer that you're getting to make it more tailored to you. Then we've got the regular organic listings down below. Now, from what Google said in the announcement, namely, this new experience builds on Google's ranking and safety systems that we've been fine-tuning for decades, that sounds like they're going to be leaning more towards the same sort of ranking factors for the websites that they show in this space that they've been using for their regular search results. Now, one criticism of all of these generative AI systems, but particularly the ones embedded in search engines, is that whilst they're taking information from publishers and websites, they're not always citing their sources or referring traffic back to those websites. This could lead to a really sticky situation where publishers can no longer afford to publish a lot of information on their website because they're not getting that traffic. So the large language models no longer have that information to draw from. Now, in the demo, Google did seem quite keen to emphasize that people would be driving to websites. People would still be clicking on websites. However, in all of the demos that they showed, nobody clicked on a single website. Also built into Google's generative AI answers are product recommendations. These product recommendations are built on Google's shopping graph, which is the upload that every e-commerce store can do to Google, which makes sure that Google understands what products it has in stock, the prices of those products, and up-to-date things like stock availability. Now, it remains to be seen exactly what the ranking factors are in these shopping recommendations, but at our digital marketing agency, Exposure Ninja, we're going to be doing our best to reverse engineer the ranking factors that get these products recommended by Google's generative AI. Underpinning Google's latest search engine functionality is their latest large language model, PaLM 2. Now, Google didn't give a huge amount of information about PaLM 2, but it did say that it's available in different sizes. These different model sizes are useful for different applications. For example, the smallest model, Gecko, can run on mobile devices and doesn't even need to be online. Google CEO Sundar claimed that PaLM 2 was better at reasoning, logic. It also had better scientific and medical capabilities as well, and it's multilingual with support for 100 languages. He also gave details about two specifically tuned models, SecPalm, which is optimized for security applications like spotting cyber attacks, and MedPalm 2, which is optimized for medical applications. And just like we saw GPT-4 outperforming lawyers in the bar exam, MedPalm 2 can now apparently outperform medical experts in medical exam style questions. So whilst PaLM 2 is the latest language model, Google also teased their Gemini model, which is going to be coming soon. That is multimodal and sounds even more powerful. But it's still in training, so we can't play with it. Now, there were some other product updates like this maps functionality that allows you to do a sort of walkthrough of your journey route. Honestly, not sure how massively useful this is going to be. Potentially a setup for augmented reality. It can also simulate weather and traffic conditions as well, which is kind of cute. There are a couple of new tools in Google Photos, including the Magic Eraser and Magic Editor, so that you can turn your grim amateur holiday snaps into well-lit, beautifully composed stock photos. Next up were some big announcements about Google Bard, which is kind of like Google's version of ChatGPT that nobody uses. For now, at least. Now, Google Bard is now running on Palm 2, the latest language model. It has code citation, so it cites sources of any blocks of code that it gives you. But most importantly, it's now going to have tools. Now, it sounds like we can think of Bard's tools a little bit like ChatGPT's plugins, but there is a big difference. The great advantage of Google Bard's tools over ChatGPT plugins is that there are a lot of integrations with Google's other software. For example, Bard can use Google's Knowledge Graph to get images. It can use Google Lens to accept images as prompts. It can use Maps to give you map results. And you can export directly to Google Sheets. But that's not all. Google Bard's also going to have extensions from third parties, including working with Adobe Firefly on image generation. For example, here we can see the user asking for an image of a unicorn and a cake at a kid's birthday party. Have you ever noticed how these AI demos are always wonderful, wholesome activities? Make me a cake picture for my child. Help me learn a new language. It's never make me a deep fake of a political candidate kicking a baby off a bridge. But let's be clear, these same tools are going to be available to both cohorts. One of the big gaps that we didn't see covered here is whether Bard is going to have access to a browser like ChatGPT does. That seems to be fairly important for ChatGPT and allows it to do things like fact check itself. But if there is no browser, then it could be related to Google's security policies, which we'll come back to later on. Elsewhere, there was generative AI built into Google Docs. For example, you can get it to write you things like job descriptions. Textile designer. In the world of AI, people are never hiring debt collectors. Inside Google Sheets, you have Help Me Organize, which is basically help me write, but for sheets. A dog walking business. How wholesome. Notice, it's never a political lobbying group working on behalf of big tobacco, figuring out how they can maximize their leverage with the most exploitable politicians. In Slides, you'll be able to generate AI images. Bit of a weird example. There was also some pretty interesting functionality demoed called Sidekick. And this is basically a little AI side panel that sits in your docs and suggests prompts to you. This looks pretty cool. In this demo, it's acting as a sort of creative partner to give you ideas and suggest things. It can also summarize email threads for you. Only wholesome ones, though, about neighborhood potlucks. Never planning a public smear campaign against the environmental group protesting against your oil exploration company. One of the most marked differences between Google's event and other AI events that we've seen is that they dedicated a decent amount of time to talking very specifically and clearly about their safety principles. In particular, this idea of bold and responsible AI. They even recapped their set of AI safety principles that they use to guide their AI product development. Things like being socially beneficial and respecting copyright and IP. Oh, well, they must have missed that one off. They also showed off some safety innovations like embedding watermarks and metadata into AI images so that users could tell what was AI generated and what was real. A reverse image search engine that allowed you to sort of fact check images to make sure that they were real. Note that this only looks like it would have worked if that image had already been debunked elsewhere. And they reminded us that they are holding their deepfake technology back from us heathens and only making it available to authorized partners. Now, in my opinion, other than the search engine, the most exciting announcement in this conference was Project Tailwind, which is actually just a prototype. This is basically an AI notebook that you can train on selected docs in your Google Drive. You choose the files in your Google Drive that you want this thing to be trained on, and then you can interact with it. Now, I think this is interesting because the information is taken from your docs. This could be super useful for business. For example, if I just want to highlight a bunch of client onboarding transcripts in Google Drive and then ask Project Tailwind what the most common questions are that keep coming up, I could get some really useful answers really quickly. So the big question then, is Google back? Now, investors seem to think so. Just take a look at this. When ChatGPT was announced, Google's share price took a beating. And again, when Microsoft integrated ChatGPT into Bing, another drop, which also coincided with Google's Bard announcement, and that flopped. Interestingly, when GPT-4 was announced, there wasn't a drop, but this jump here is following the developer announcement. Clearly, investors are saying, prospects are looking good for Google. Now, of course, Google's search engine updates here are absolutely key. Search makes up 60% of Google's advertising revenue, which makes up 80% of its total revenue. So it's mission critical for Google to entrench its dominance in the world of search. Now, from a marketer's perspective, and as someone who has been working in search engine optimization for over a decade now, I think the updates that Google has demoed here will be enough to stop people leaving Google for ChatGPT or Bing, so I can understand investors' optimism in Google's prospects. Of course, this relies on the answers that their generative AI provides being good. If they're not, all bets are off. The world of artificial intelligence moves fast, and as a business leader or someone who cares about the impact of AI on your business, you need to be up to date with exactly what's going on. Join the Powered by AI newsletter at pbai.co to get the latest goings on in the world of AI. This is a weekly distillation for those people who don't have time to spend their entire lives in Twitter smashing refresh on #AI to keep up with the latest news. We've got you. This week, EU regulators dropped a potential bomb on the world of AI. Check this out. Under the proposals for Europe's Artificial Intelligence Act, developers of generative AI models like ChatGPT, so that's OpenAI, Google, would have to disclose content that was generated by AI and publish summaries of copyrighted data used for training purposes so that creators can be remunerated for the use of their work. Firstly, this sounds incredibly ambitious. Remunerated for their work? How? Who's doing the remuneration? How do you work out how much remuneration to give each creator? There's also a ban on facial recognition for surveillance of citizens. It's important to say this is not law yet. Negotiations will now need to start with other EU institutions and member states, and that could take a long time. It's taken the MEPs 2 years to get to this stage, so who knows how long it will be until these things start becoming law. But this is by far the most aggressive regulatory proposal that we've seen yet, so it'll be super interesting to see how this pans out and how, if at all, the AI companies' behaviors change, knowing this is going to be the stance proposed by European regulators. My final observation this week is that the tech leaders responsible for building AI have absolutely no idea where this is going, or how you are going to survive, or how businesses are going to survive. Don't believe me? I have 3 exhibits for you. Exhibit A. The initial narrative about AI models was that you'd have these general models that would be used for general output, like GPT-3 or GPT-4, but that the real value would be in building fine-tuned models that excelled in specific use cases. Just listen to OpenAI CEO Sam Altman in an interview with LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman just 7 months ago.
That take an existing very large model of the future and tune it, which is not just fine-tuning, like all of the things you can do. I think there will be a lot of access provided to create the model for medicine or using a computer or like the kind of like friend or whatever. And then those companies will create a lot of enduring value because they will have like a special version of, they won't have to have created the base model, but they will have created something they can use just for themselves or share with others that has this unique data flywheel going that sort of improves over time and all of that. So I think there will be a lot of value created in that middle layer.
So that was 7 months ago. But listen to Sam speaking this week to MIT.
More of a fine-tuning story, and we have been thinking about how to offer that in different ways. But people are doing pretty amazing things with the base model, and for a bunch of reasons often seem to prefer that. As the models get better and better, it does seem like there is a trend towards less and less of a need to fine-tune, and you can do more and more in the context.
Now, hypothetically, if you were an AI startup that had built for Sam's middle layer, where you were building a fine-tuned model specific for certain use cases, you're now realizing that that prediction hasn't come to pass at all. And in a week where we've seen Google wipe out another tranche of AI startups with functionality that is built into its existing products, this is a really interesting illustration that the unpredictability of this disruption even seems to catch some of these new masters of the universe off guard. Not convinced? Exhibit B. In an interview on This Week in Startups, LinkedIn founder and co-founder of Inflection AI, who built the Pi chatbot, which we covered last week, reveals that he hadn't actually heard about ChatGPT's code interpreter plugin. Now, this is potentially one of the biggest innovations by OpenAI yet. Now, you might think, okay, what's the big deal? Reid is an incredibly busy guy. Maybe he hasn't heard of every innovation in AI yet. But for me, this is fundamental for 2 main reasons. Firstly, Reed was on the board of OpenAI, so if anybody should be on top of what they're building, it's him. Secondly, though, he's a co-founder of an AI startup. You'd think that he would be super up to date with what's going on in the world of AI. But I think there's other evidence that Reed has been wrong-footed in the world of AI. Just have a look at the Pi chatbot. Even though Reed co-founded Inflection AI with the founder of DeepMind, which is a AI OG, this chatbot seems to have completely missed. It just doesn't feel like a viable competitor to OpenAI and Google. In this podcast, the reasoning that Reed gave for the existence of Pi just wasn't defensible at all. It felt really fluffy, confused, and a bit vague. And you could quite easily replicate Pi's functionality in ChatGPT just from using a system prompt like pretend to be empathetic, say haha, and write slowly. Thirdly, Reed failed to spot that one of his portfolio companies, which is a startup building slide decks using AI, seem to have almost no moat against Google and Microsoft building these AI tools into their very popular slides and PowerPoint products. Still not convinced that the masters of the universe don't know what's going on? Check out this interview with Box founder Aaron, where he's on to talk about Box's new AI features. In fact, he talks about how he's just sort of pivoted the whole company to focus on AI. But he didn't know about Code Interpreter either. This is massive for him because Code Interpreter is essentially the same functionality as Box AI, albeit without some of the privacy controls that Box AI has. But you'd think that a founder of a company that's just pivoted the business to focus on AI would have their finger on the pulse of what is going on with all the major AI players in this space, particularly the biggest players. Now, I'm not criticizing Aaron, Sam, or Reed. These are busy people. They can't possibly know everything and they can't possibly see the future. But doesn't this just raise the question that how are businesses and ambitious, ordinary people supposed to navigate this fast-changing world of AI and find defensible positions that are stable for the long term? If these supremely well-connected people and the folk who are building these technologies don't know what their tech is going to be doing in 6 months' time, how do you make sure your business or industry isn't totally wiped out by the next release? I think the only thing any of us can do is committing to staying up to date with exactly what's going on in the world of AI. Testing out the new platforms, finding out their strengths, their capabilities, and their limitations. Also, when these announcements come out, don't just look at the specifics, but look at the patterns, look at the trends and the direction of where things are going. And finally, make sure you're subscribed to the PBAI newsletter so every week you get a distillation of the most important announcements this week and what it means for you. Until next week, see you soon.